Hi, Larry.
Hey. Welcome, Ralph. Thanks for your time. Interested in what you have to say about nuclear weapons in this moment, in this historical moment. You know, the field of psychology has had an interest in nuclear weapons for a long time, especially since World War II. It sort of ebbs and flows like other issues. We are in an ebb period, I think, now, but things are, I gather from you, a lot is happening these days, and so psychologists need to know, and you know, there may be some ways that the field can help.
You referred to these days, which I think is a really good way to talk about the time that we're in right now. I did a slideshow at the Good Shepherd Episcopal Church earlier this year in Knoxville, and one of the slides had pulled headlines off of the New York Times, CNN, the Washington Post, NPR, and the headlines were talking about the United States being on the brink of a new nuclear. Are we on the edge of a new nuclear arms race? U.S. moving toward a new nuclear arms race. And then the next slide was actually from the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists in January, where they said we are in a full-blown nuclear arms race. So the mass media is kind of getting there, but the people who are on the inside, the people who have working knowledge of this on a day-to-day basis, recognize that we are now in the middle of a full-blown global nuclear arms race. Not just in the middle of it, but we're the instigators of this. Our government's commitment of trillions of dollars to modernize our nuclear weapons infrastructure and our weapons and stuff like that is what has reignited this nuclear arms race.
Right. So what triggered this conversation is that you mentioned to me that there's some critical things happening in regards to that nuclear arms race, and you participated in the public comment on that, so tell us about that.
And so the government is now moving toward a plan to expand plutonium pit production capacity at Los Alamos to 30 pits a year, and to build a new plutonium pit fabrication facility at Savannah River in South Carolina to make up 50 pits per year. Just last week, they talked about maybe expanding that to, rather than having 80 pits a year capacity, to having 180 pits a year capacity.
And we need to make new ones?
So we don't really need to make any new ones because we have about 20,000 pits in storage at Amarillo, Texas at the Pantex plant.
Now, my guess is that public awareness of what's happening currently is you know, not up to speed necessarily, but that's not anything new. The public has been kind of in and out of awareness, I guess, and what we have been aware of is oftentimes only part of the story, or not really the real story at all.
That most of the conversation about nuclear weapons happens inside a kind of a bubble. Ray Hutchison at Reaching Critical Will in New York at the United Nations has created the term the authorized conversation. So we're allowed to talk about nuclear weapons in terms of policy, deterrence, mutually assured destruction. We're allowed to talk about nuclear weapons in terms of their military posture and force projection and keeping up with the Russians or the Chinese, things like that. We're not allowed to talk about nuclear weapons in terms of what they do to human beings. The humanitarian impact of nuclear weapons is a forbidden topic. And if you want to talk about that, you'll be marginalized. You know, if there's a high-level meeting happening in Washington, D.C., you're not going to get invited because you don't stay on topic. So when I was writing these comments, I reflected on the fact that in the last 10 years, the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, ICAN, working with some of the governments around the world and a lot of non-government agencies, managed to get the United Nations to adopt the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And the sole focus of that effort was the humanitarian impact of nuclear weapons. It was to break through the wall that says we're not going to talk about that part of the story. They were successful in doing that. The treaty was passed by the United Nations. It entered into force in 2021. Of course, the United States hasn't signed it.
Tell me more about the comments that you submitted, which I assume you had in mind not crossing the line into something that they would immediately dismiss? What did you say, and what was your strategy in saying it?
Well, I would say, I certainly included in my comments some of the typical concerns that we'd have about the actual environmental impacts of these nuclear weapons. But I also, one of the things that for me was very different was that I wrote them as one person writing to another person, one human being to another human being. The person on the other end of these comments has to write them. They're a contractor. They're working for some company that the Department of Energy has hired to process these comments, and they're supposed to categorize them. This is outside the scope, this is about earthquake, this is about fire. And so they just do their job during the day, but then they go home at night. So there's a place in the comments where I point out, and this was not easy to say, that these plutonium pits, that this is part of the process of getting to manufacturing plutonium pits, and if they're ever used, I'll be dead. And the person reading these comments will be dead. Their family, their kids. You'll be gone. Your family will be gone. Our pets will be gone. You know, everybody we know will be gone. The people in our community. I listed professions. I listed relatives. All of these kind of things. This is what the bomb does. It kills everybody. It destroys everything. When you think about Hiroshima, if you have any mental image at all, it's pretty much of a denuded landscape, and maybe you see the Hiroshima dome that survived, the skeleton of the dome that survived, but most of it's the landscape. We hardly ever see pictures of the victims. They exist. They're too hard to look at, but they're the truth about the bomb that we have to face. And I think that we sort of block that out of our whole sensibility, our whole sense of what's going on with nuclear weapons. They're a military weapon, that their sole purpose is to kill people by the tens and hundreds of millions. I have adopted, after almost 30-some years of being the coordinator of the Oak Ridge Environmental Peace Alliance and making presentations all over the place, I've adopted for myself a rule. I won't talk about nuclear weapons anymore without talking about the humanitarian impact.
Mm-hmm. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the community here, the organization that you've worked with for over 30 years, the Oak Ridge Environmental Peace Alliance, with the idea that there are organizations like this all over the United States and abroad, and these are based in communities where psychologists live and can be supported and worked with and joined by psychologists. What's OREPA about?
So the Oak Ridge Environmental Peace Alliance has been working for almost 40 years, and a primary focus of our work is Oak Ridge, Tennessee, which has one of the massive nuclear weapons production complexes on the grounds there. But we have also, over those same years, worked in collaboration with groups just like ours. We know our colleagues at Los Alamos, at Savannah River, at Lawrence Livermore, at Kansas City. And we work with them through the Alliance for Nuclear Accountability. We meet several times a year. We have monthly strategy calls. We go to Washington, D.C. once a year to advocate for certain positions and budget decisions in D.C. So we work collaboratively that way. We're also part of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. There are 600 and some organizations, but we're one of them. And when you talk about the role of psychologists, I think about the psychological impact of nuclear weapons being made in your community. There are a lot of people who wrestle whether they ever are able to come out to talk about it, even with a therapist. But doing this work cannot happen without some kind of psychological impact that gets probed, or that destroys people or damages people because it doesn't get explored. So I think, there's an obligation within the community of psychologists to consider what their role should be if they are in a nuclear weapons kind of community. A couple of years ago, Archbishop Wester in New Mexico came out and said nuclear weapons are outside the will of God. That's a powerful thing for a man of the cloth to say. There are a lot of Roman Catholics in New Mexico, and a good number of them undoubtedly working at the Los Alamos National Laboratory, participating in the manufacture of nuclear weapons. What do they make when especially in a hierarchical denomination like the Roman Catholic Church, what do they make of the Archbishop saying no?
Sure.
I've talked with lots of people who have worked at the Oak Ridge facilities who've wrestled with it. Some stopped working there because that was the conclusion they came to, and others were still conflicted about what they were doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe conflicted is good.
At the very least, yeah.
I think about maybe this is a hyperbole analogy, but I think about the ordinary German people who lived in the communities surrounding the death camps.
Yeah.
Over time, knowing at some level what's going on, and just being presented with that reality and that question. Does life go on as normal, or do you follow that awareness and see how you can be engaged in making things better?
Well, and as asking the question about the larger population, over time, that shifts and develops. I mean, if you go to Germany now, they have conversations about whether or not people have recognized what happened in the concentration camps, whether the country has taken responsibility. There's a massive program for reparations and efforts to reunite people with property that was stolen from them, particularly art and cultural things that were stolen from them, which is a very, they put cobblestones in the sidewalk outside of homes where Jewish people were taken away or where they were killed, memorialized in a way that recognizes the inhumanity, the desecration, contrasted with the United States, where we have the Manhattan Project National Park, where we are celebrating the atomic bomb, the production of the atomic bomb. And Oak Ridge has several sites that are part of the Manhattan Project National Park. Los Alamos has some of those sites. And part of that, I think, is because what's the alternative to celebrating? The alternative is to tell the truth about it, about ourselves. And that goes against the grain of everything we think of when we're making America great again.
From my own experience as a professor, opportunities became apparent to me in the courses I taught that the production of nuclear weapons 25 miles away from the classroom was relevant to connect the dots, have people who are involved in the struggle for peace and justice in the area of nuclear weapons like yourself to come in and talk to students, and just to attend things that the local organizations do, or to join organizations. If you don't happen to have an Oak Ridge in your backyard like we do, there's a psychologist for social responsibility, and the Peace Psychology Division of the APA. So there are definitely things that psychologists can do